This is episode 18 of Youthful Perspectives. I'm your host, Mason Beerbaum. My guest today is an author, journalist, traveler, and my favorite University of Minnesota professor, Scott Winter. Scott just finished teaching his first semester at the U of M. Before that, he taught journalism classes at Bethel University and the University of Nebraska. Within those roles, he took his students to a variety of countries and continents to cover stories that matter. Our conversation covers a variety of topics like AI in journalism, defining moments in Scott's journalism career, the lessons of travel and dealing with its discomforts, Scott's favorite authors, and the importance of not becoming complacent in life. I learned so much about journalism, writing, and life from Scott, and I hope you will too. Here is Scott Winter. Can you tell me about the first story you ever published?
Oh, well, the story that I tell my students is that when I was a kid growing up in Grand Forks and Bismarck, North Dakota, my mom and dad wanted me to clean my room, which I didn't do, clear out the dishwasher, which I rarely did. And then when I was in ninth grade, my dad, who was a sports editor of the Bismarck Tribune at the time, would say, well, go cover that hockey game. So I was 14 and ride a bike to Schaumburg Arena and cover a high school hockey game. And I'd have to have it in like an hour after the game was over, right? And so it didn't really matter how hard it was or how easy it was. It didn't really matter like what I had learned in school. It just ultimately, I'd have a story and it had to be there in an hour, right? And I got paid minimum wage to do it, $3.15 an hour. And I just read a hockey story and then I wrote one and it was published the next day. And that's where I started in journalism.
So 14 years old, your editor's your dad, and you're getting paid minimum wage.
Yeah, exactly. So he would say things to me in the newsroom like, don't say Mason Beerbaum of Brainerd, or I can't remember where you're from.
St. Cloud.
St. Cloud, yeah. Don't say Mason Beerbaum from St. Cloud. Say St. Cloud's Mason Beerbaum, because then you save the word of. You don't waste your reader's time. And you get real grumpy if you didn't learn that lesson right away.
Yeah.
You know? So he was my first teacher just through real basics. He banged out stories with his two index fingers. He never actually really finished high school. And became a sports editor in his hometown of Weyburn, Saskatchewan. So, yeah. And then as a kid, I never wanted to be him, obviously, because nobody wants to be their parents. But here I am as a journalism professor now.
Yeah, more or less kind of grew into that role. What did you type your first story on? Was it a classic typewriter or what was the
We had these huge machines, these computers. And I had taken typing class. That was a class you had to take in middle school.
One of the most underrated classes in middle school, in my opinion.
It's a skill, right? And so it was really competitive. So I remember like challenging Amy Olsen to like type offs. We were both in the 70s, pretty impressed with ourselves. But yeah, that it wound up coming in pretty handy, that class. Yeah,
absolutely. I always tell my former typing teacher, Miss Thompson, that class was one of the most useful classes I ever took in middle school. And I was in middle school kind of a troublemaker, more or less, and I kind of matured during COVID. But before that, I would always kind of goof off a lot. But I remember not necessarily, I wouldn't say applying myself to the class, but definitely trying to do a decent job in that class. And it's definitely paid off, certainly, being a journalism major now.
One of the biggest problems, Mason, on all levels of education is we do a horrible job of explaining why something matters. You know what I mean? I never understood why I was taking math classes until it dawned on me later in a conversation with a pre-calc teacher in high school that math, you're not doing that to get a job in math. You're not doing the odds 1 through 63 so you can get good at the odds 1 through 63s. And what you're learning is mental calisthenics to make your mind sharp, to make your mind imaginative, to make your mind interesting. And then you're doing all the 1 through 63 because you got to teach yourself that the tedium can work for you. Like it can become muscle memory, and then everything gets easier, you know? He says it's not about math. It's about everything but math. And, you know, he was right. I could apply that to many things.
I feel like that applies not only to education, but to just leadership in general.
Yeah.
The leader that's able to adequately explain the why to his subordinates.
Typing was so pragmatic for you that you understood, wow, this could really help me. This makes me faster. And I see where it's kind of like mowing the lawn. I can see where I was, and now I can see where I am.
Right.
You know, and you saw growth.
Absolutely. Right? That's the one thing I've appreciated having just taken your class this past semester and reading the stories that we wrote in the story labs at the beginning of the semester and then comparing them to the published pieces that have been uploaded on Medium. And growth really is the word to describe it. And looking back and being like, dang, I can't believe that was like what I was writing back then. It's so sloppy or crude perhaps, but now you look at where I am now and it's inspiring. It's exciting to look back on that work.
Right. And I think I'm pretty good on the back end of having people reflect on what they learned in different aspects. That's kind of what my final is all about. I'm not very good on the front end of explaining, okay, here's why this numeracy lab matters. Here's why doing this math is going to be cool for you. And you'll have a niche in the market, you know. I got to get better at that.
Do you think you'll ever incorporate some sort of AI lab where students would use AI perhaps to help them write a story?
I think it's inevitable. What my friends and colleagues are telling me is that, you know, whenever I show skepticism, my journalistic skepticism about something like AI, I'm showing, you know, how I'm such an old white guy, right? But all my career, I've been a pretty early adopter of technologies. I'm just really skeptical of AI. And when I show that, a lot of it comes from being a pro-union guy and worrying about people losing jobs and people having their lives disrupted. A lot of people think all disruption is good. I don't think that's necessarily true. But like a couple of friends have said to me and colleagues have said to me, look, Scott, AI will never replace you, but somebody who uses AI will.
Right.
Right. And so that sounds like it should be like crocheted onto a pillow or something. It's like too simple an answer, but for some reason it speaks to me.
Yeah.
So down the road, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, you kind of took that quote right out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing. My roommate says that it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's someone that knows how to use AI.
And for me, like we use AI for a lot of things. I think, you know, Otter AI is a perfect example. We use that to save ourselves time so we can have more time being creative and doing more reporting rather than, you know, writing out a transcript and so on. So I think if there are ways that AI can make reporters and editors and photographers more productive, I think that's great. But if AI is there to improve the bottom line and make more money for stockholders, you know, I'm not into it.
Yeah.
Is it going to be good for stakeholders in journalism, the readers, the democracy? If AI will be good for that, then great.
Yeah. I know time will tell how it's going to play out. It's certainly interesting to be kind of, I remember when ChatGPT was released in November 2022, and that was kind of a watershed moment in AI. And now having gone through college for coming up on 3 years now, it's interesting to see how it slowly seeps into the educational landscape of it all. I mean, you're hard-pressed to find someone that doesn't use AI nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, you got to teach it with the ethics of the tool. I mean, you can't do it blindly. You know, so I'm trying to figure that out.
I know I saw a 60 Minutes program on the CEO of Anthropic, and they hired a PhD philosopher whose specific job is to teach ethics to their AI model. And I was thinking of you when I saw that. I said, would that not be a perfect profile right there?
Yeah, no kidding.
To age-old philosophies, applying it to modern age technology.
How do you pick that person, and then what do they do every day?
Right.
What do they do at 9 a.m.? What do they do at 3 p.m.? What does that look like? Yeah.
I know. I was like, dang, if I wasn't in school right now, I would totally hop on a plane to San Francisco and try to interview that person because that would be a great story.
You can always ask. You can always like bug people like me or the director of the school and say, I need to do this story. So where do I get funding to do it?
Right.
You know?
I'll have to keep that in mind then moving forward. Could you tell me about a defining moment in your sports reporting career?
I had this editor who recently passed away. His name is Ryan Bakken, when I was working at the Grand Forks Herald when I was about your age. And what I hated about Ryan is what I love about him now, and that is that no story was ever good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it came to my bylines, and I was working my tail off, I mean, I was working to pay for groceries and to pay for rent, but I was really working to impress him because nothing impressed him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I would get sports on the front page, and I would do stories that I was really proud of, or I thought were really good, or more importantly, were really original. Like I'd never seen a sports story like that before. And every time he would just crap on that story. You know what I mean? And what I learned from him ultimately was that just never bore me, like you're going to go to a game, and at that game, the same thing's going to happen every game, right? Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, somebody's going to be happy, somebody's going to be pissed off, and all of it's going to play out in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to find a way to write that story differently every time, and find a character who matters every time, and find stakes that matter every time. And so you better bring your imagination to it. And my mantra for my sports classes now is that it's not good enough to be good. Like every team has a good player. Every newsroom has a good reporter. It's not a story that somebody's good. There's got to be something else. And I always have to be on the lookout for that other thing.
Mm-hmm. Kind of what's below the surface. Who's got stake in the outcome of this game?
So a guy who sticks with me is there was this high school hockey player from Warroad. His name was Nathan, and he's a big guy, and he's going to be a big college recruit. And he got Hodgkin's disease, and now it's a curable form of cancer, but back then we weren't so sure. It was hit and miss, right? And he decided to play in Section 8 up in Minnesota. You know how serious that is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was covering Section 8 hockey for the Grand Forks Herald when the ground war happened in 1991 in Iraq, and we were all scared because Grand Forks Air Force Base controlled a lot of nuclear weapons. And if what they were saying about Saddam Hussein was true, that he had, weapons of mass destruction, then one of the big targets would be us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when that happened, the ground war, everything shut down. But no hockey games shut down in Section 8.
Of course.
No, they played all those games in those Quonsets, in those great arenas where you have more snowmobiles than cars in the parking lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And through all that, Nathan kept playing hockey. And if I remember right, when players like checked him lightly or didn't check him at all, he would get pissed off and yell at him for taking it easy on him. Mm. And ultimately, everybody just wound up loving this guy, despite he's a big hitter, a big dude, and despite how he'd get angry like that. And they ended up calling him Chemo. That was his nickname. Like all the other teams, hey, Chemo, how you doing? Or they check him into the boards. How'd that feel, Chemo? And he loved it. He thrived on it. And so that was an example of there's got to be something else, He also was a big-time, I don't know if you know what Awana is. It's like a Christian group, kind of like FCA, like Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Okay. He led Awana like youth groups, and that tied into his faith, tied into how he was dealing with Hodgkin's and all that. And, a lot of journalists wouldn't want to go down that faith route, but that was part of his story. And like I learned to just look for something else, Had nothing to do with the skates or wins and losses. Like that's easy to report,
Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening with his diagnosis?
It went into remission. He got healthy again.
He did?
Yeah. Played college hockey. Yeah. That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
So would you say when it comes to a great piece of sports journalism, it's kind of not – obviously the sport that you're covering is very important, but it's outside of that as well. What would you say, again, is the piece or what makes a great piece of sports journalism?
I don't know. The pack mentality in sports journalism is really annoying. I hate press conferences. I'm not big on post-game, like locker rooms, things like that, where, I don't know. I guess one time I was covering a Vikings game, and they had just blown a game to somebody, a really bad team. I think it was Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the day. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty devastating loss, and the quarterback had played terribly, and just all the the packed journalists, like dozens of journalists, TV cameras, everything. We're all surrounding the quarterback and we're all surrounding the coach. And what are they going to say? Yeah, we sucked and it was a devastating loss and we got to get better, and cliche after cliche after cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I wanted to do is quote what they were quoting in my story. They'd have the same stuff I would have, right? So I had already found a different angle. I'd already found a different character, two different characters. And my whole goal going to those games was, I'm nobody from the Grand Forks Herald, but I want to find a story nobody else has so that all those other papers, the St. Paul Pioneer Press, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, WCCO, my story would be so much better that they'd have to run my story, and then they want to hire me.
Yeah.
And it worked sometimes, you know, it was kind of cool.
So you basically, just like you were saying earlier, don't bore the reader.
Yeah. Well, and look beyond the typical, right? Look for a sports business story, like sports culture story. You know, I just got sent a story by a buddy. The New York Times did basically a social media story about the 5-story walk-up you have to do in Madison Square Garden if you're an athlete. Like you park down below or you get dropped off down below by a limo or whatever. You have to walk up a ramp that's 5 floors.
Really?
And it's like a long process, but it's kind of this dramatic opening up of Madison Square Garden to you when you come up that 5th floor. And so they got all these athletes to talk about it, and they walked with them up that ramp. Well, that's not something that happens during the game. It's not something that affects the standings. It has nothing to do with stats. You know, it's just an interesting, like, dramatic thing that happens that nobody else thought of. Wow, that's a good story. Those are the stories I want to highlight in class.
That's one of the mantras I have in life is Steve Jobs is think different. I think applying that to journalism like you're doing with that, the Madison Square Garden piece or the different characters after Vikings losses, you're thinking different, you're reporting different, and the reader's going to be thankful for that. Yeah,
and ESPN, the magazine, used to do that really well. Sports Illustrated used to do that really well. There aren't many places now that are doing that really well. You know, you got to find startups like The Defector. You have to find really good beat writers with The Athletic, you know. You really have to search to find good sports journalism these days.
And how long did you work in the sports journalism field before you went back to school?
I took a weird route. I did most of my sports journalism in high school and college, and then quickly thereafter. And then I went into high school teaching.
Okay.
And then I went back to journalism, but not in a sports capacity, and back to high school teaching. And then I went back to school.
Okay.
Where I taught sports classes and got back into sports journalism.
And that was out at Nebraska, correct?
Yeah, Huskerland. I didn't know anything about Huskers. I had never followed college football. It was my least favorite sport.
Really?
I hated the money. I hated the drama of it all. I just didn't get it. But that was because of where I grew up. The closest team to me was Minnesota, and they'd never been good in my lifetime. And in Nebraska, I got a heavy dose of college football.
And why did you settle on Nebraska in particular?
My wife worked in a chain of newspapers called Lee Enterprises, just a horrific corporate journalism group. But one of their flagship newspapers was in Madison, Wisconsin, and the other one was in Lincoln, Nebraska. And when I was ready to go to school, one of our best friends in college worked at the Lincoln paper and wanted to hire my wife. So we went there.
Okay.
So it was Wisconsin or Nebraska, and we ended up in Nebraska.
And how did you and your wife end up meeting? Because you mentioned her in class a few times now. She's currently a writer at the Star Tribune. What's the origin story behind that?
Yeah, she's a great journalist, but when I met her, she wasn't really a journalist at all. We met in college, and we went to different colleges. She went to a university in my hometown of Bismarck, and I was up in Grand Forks at UND. She was at University of Mary. And so she was a comm major, wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but she got an internship at my hometown newspaper where my dad worked, and she killed it and then wanted to become a journalist. But when we met at a golf course. I was selling green fees, which I'm still not sure what a green fee is. I think it's just a ticket to go play golf. And I had to wear all the Golf Pro stuff, The last time I wore a polo shirt was the last time I worked at a golf at a golf course, but it was just this 9-hole city course, and it was just a job for me to get paid by the hour in the summer. And then she worked at it was attached to a hockey arena, and like the concession stand was in the hockey arena, and she worked there, and so we met there, and yeah. And she became a journalist, and I was already a journalist. It was weird.
What was your first date?
We played tennis.
Okay.
Yep. Just whacked tennis balls around. She was a college tennis player who didn't know how to play tennis. So the University of Mary had a nationally ranked team, but they were short one player to go to nationals. So they just added her, and she didn't win a game. She didn't win a match. She didn't win a game. She didn't win a set. I don't think she won a game. But she went to nationals with the team.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be a cool little story right there.
But yeah, exactly. But we hit balls. Like I was never a high school tennis player or college tennis player, but one of my best friends in high school wound up coaching here, the women here at University of Minnesota. He just wanted somebody to just beat the brains out of a tennis ball with who could hit it back. And like I didn't know much about tennis, but I could swing out, So we'd swing out for like 3 hours in the hottest part of summer because that's when the tennis courts would be available.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so tennis, we've been playing tennis ever since.
Do you guys still play tennis together, or do you guys play pickleball now?
We do, not enough. My wife wants to move to pickleball. I'm fighting it with everything I have.
Why are you fighting it?
Well, these pickleball people are getting to be a problem, Mason. I had a former sports student at Nebraska who's now a pickleball podcaster.
Really?
Like full time. He makes more money than I do.
Pickleball podcast.
Yeah. He's a pickleball podcaster and a pretty good player too.
That kind of rolls off the tongue nice, pickleball podcaster.
Yeah, it's serious business now.
Yeah.
Because every age plays it, and the stars are pretty amazing to watch. I hate it. It's eating up tennis courts left and right.
That's true.
It's wrong.
My hometown, I know I said...
We used to shake our fists at the skateboarders or the people who had dogs, right? Now it's the pickleballers.
I know I did mention how I said I was from the St. Cloud, but I should say St. Cloud area. My hometown in Avon, Minnesota, there was a tennis court by our local baseball park that was there for as long as I could remember. It was for at least 18 years when I was living there. And then just recently, they converted it from tennis courts to pickleball courts, and so a classic example.
It's a sad reality.
It's like, was it Blockbuster? Is that the like video store that sold movies? It's like just slowly dying to Netflix equivalent right there.
Yeah, it goes back to AI. Like how ready are you for change? When I got my first editor job, we had to move back to my hometown for family reasons, and instead of getting a teaching job, I got a job at the paper. And the first week I was there, the guy who hired me was kind of an old friend from the Grand Forks Herald, but the publisher forced him to hand out these books, these self-help books, to the whole newsroom. And as managers, we had to be on board. And the book was this self-help craze called Who Moved My Cheese? I don't remember who wrote it. Thank goodness, because I don't want to insult whoever it was. But it was just this cheesy book about how to adapt to change. Right. And the newsrooms are changing, and so it's a good thing to spend time on. But the book was so corny. It was just awful. But we're still adapting to change. I mean, tennis courts to pickleball, AI coming in, like changing in the journalism business model, all of that.
It's like at an exponential rate, it almost seems like. I mean, I always mention on the podcast, it seems like every episode I mention this, the fact that the Wright brothers' first flight was in 1903, and then by 1969, we had someone on the moon. I mean, that's in a, 66-year period right there?
It's pretty amazing.
So to think about what's going to happen in this century and the rate of change.
And there's a flip side of that too, right? Like technology is just the life cycle of technology is going faster and faster and faster and faster. But journalism adapts in ways that are probably really good, and then in ways that are really bad by not adjusting at all. But one thing in that job, I really hated that job in my hometown, that editing job, because nobody wanted to learn. Nobody wanted to change. So I totally get why they did that with that cheesy book, the cheesy book about moving my cheese. but my editor, my direct boss, was this really smart guy named Randy Bradbury, and he said, "Well, what's really wrong with journalism is not, the internet coming." He was a techie guy who really was an early adopter of all technology, but he said the problem is corporatization, and the problem is profit margin.
Yep.
This paper is amazing, and we are, from a stockholder standpoint, we're making like 40%, return. It's ridiculous. He said what we should be making is 5 to 7%, and putting all that back into R&D to make ourselves better and find new ways to tell stories that readers want. So essentially, because we're so crucial to the democracy, we should be a utility, like a city-owned water company or electric company, But in a world, a U.S. economy that wants to privatize everything and wants people to, outdo each other and outbrand each other and outgain each other, and we want everything to be a sport. Politics, business, who's winning? That's all we really care about. He said, in the end, the only thing that'll save us is if we become a utility that's as crucial to democracy as water and power. Mm-hmm. And I still think that's true. If we did that and just concentrated on doing good journalism, we'd be better off. I feel the same way about health insurance,
right?
Or healthcare. Like in the end, let's pay our doctors well, let's pay our nurses well, but let's get rid of all the people who are profiting off that work. Yeah. And let's take care of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that can be applied to so many different aspects of society, like military-industrial complex, big pharma, like you mentioned. I think with journalism too, because when you're saying it act as a utility, are you saying that there should be like government funds that go towards these sort of publications? I mean, you're seeing all these news deserts that are coming out, and now local newspapers are dying off.
I don't think that politicians should have the power to license or unlicense news outlets. Mm-hmm. I think that's a little bit scary, but I do think that there should be funding, like a bit of a ProPublica / BBC model, that people get paid for their work. And people get sued for stealing other people's work, like the whole internet does. Mm-hmm. Photos, graphics, everything, stories. And I think we could, through government action, we can save journalism. But relying on government to solve things is not always the best way to go in this country.
This is true.
Or many countries, frankly.
I know last night I watched the movie Nightcrawler, Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I've had that on my list. I've never watched it.
You should watch it because it is an interesting movie.
He like photographs crime scenes.
Yeah, and it's like a very
some
cutthroat.
Ethical.
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's what I was telling my buddies. I was watching. Like my professor would have a very fun time watching this movie because the ethical dilemma.
Pretty cringy. Should I replace Spotlight with Nightcrawler?
No, Spotlight's still better in my opinion, but the movie got better as it went on. At first, wasn't liking it, but it basically is more or less just saying how if you're the first one at this terrible crime scene, but you get the recording of it, then everyone else's video that they're going to come and get later on is useless, and therefore your video is that much more valuable. And it's just people don't even care about the victim that's in this video or the family of the victim. Right. The only thing they're caring about is the fact to be first and to get it out.
The gore and the money.
And exactly. Yeah. And it's a kind of interesting metaphor towards maybe some of those sensational newspapers you see nowadays and how they'll be the first one to publish this terrible plane crash that happened in the middle of nowhere that you wouldn't. It probably has no direct effect on you, but that headline's going to grab your attention.
Right.
You might even click on the banner that comes across your phone, and that's going to generate more money for them. So when you have newspapers doing stuff like that, it's no surprise to see their approval ratings at all-time lows.
Yeah, I mean, even when our political leaders, for them, it's all about followers. Mm-hmm. It's all about winning too. I mean, why wouldn't people go that route?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you were an editor in your hometown. What, in your opinion, are the qualities that make a good newspaper editor?
I think number one is news judgment, like understanding what the real story is here. Mm-hmm. Here's the issue. Here's the story. One of the things my wife is really good at is she can take a huge stack of court filing, like a case that is like a foot and a half tall when you put it out on sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. And within 20 minutes, she'll know exactly what this story is about. That's what you need in a good editor. Somebody who understands the story. Somebody who understands good characters. Somebody who understands how to raise the stakes for readers and make it connect to them, personally, whether it's their pocketbook or their heart or their brain or whatever, Secondly, I think it's ethics, understanding why we're doing the story we're doing and why it matters in our community and how to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in the end, like any coach, I always use athletic metaphors for newsrooms. You got to be a coach that people trust and want to follow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I guess that's what makes a good decision maker at the top.
And I think also too, kind of like the way you run your classroom, it seems, in the sense that you don't want to be easily satisfied when you're an editor.
Right.
You want to have your writers or your students push themselves to be better.
I think the first time students see my edits, they're pretty freaked out, mainly because they did the assignment. They want to be done. Just tell me how I did, and I'll do the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to deal with that anymore. And my thinking is the more we deal with the same story and get it right,
mm-hmm.
the more we learn from it. Like I think the first draft is a lot of work because it's a reporting and it's putting it together. But we should spend at least that much time on the next draft to fill the holes. I mean, anybody who does an artistic project of any kind, like a podcast, like a painting, like anything, they'll tell you that the last 5% is the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Like getting that last part down right, getting it right, like filling in all the gaps, fixing all the mistakes. That's where greatness happens, And sometimes I think students just want to be done rather than be great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think every story has to be a Pulitzer Prize winner, but every story we should learn from,
mm-hmm.
And get better. It should make us better.
That's what I took away from this class last semester was when you submit the rough draft, you might think you're done, but you're halfway done because you got all the edits coming.
Yeah.
And the edits that you provide, like you said in class, the more edits there are, the more faith you have in the story.
Students don't believe me when I say that. I think they think I'm working them, and maybe I am a little bit. But in the end, if a story is garbage, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it
mm-hmm.
as an editor because it's clear the student doesn't really care about the story that much or believe in it that much. Sometimes he's just had bad luck. That happens, But if somebody's really working it and pouring, their soul into a story, I want to meet that energy.
Yeah. Have you found it difficult within your teaching career, whether that's at the high school or college level, with students just being complacent with the work and not striving to be great? And if they view it more as a chore and not like an artistic venture, perhaps?
This is a great question. To be honest with you, the biggest problems I have were with adults in newsrooms. Mm-hmm. They had their way of doing it, and they didn't want to change that. So every story read the same. It was just about different people
mm-hmm.
or a different topic, but always read the same. Never surprised me. I'm like, don't you want to be a journalist who surprises me? Don't you want to push yourself to do something you've never done before? And some people just didn't want to do that.
Is that because they're complacent? They were scared of change?
Yeah.
Or?
I think it's just inability to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if that's your thing, maybe journalism isn't for you, or at least reporting isn't for you.
Yeah.
Well,
you talk about inability to be uncomfortable. You've done a lot of traveling in your life. You've been to Kosovo, India. You've also been to Ethiopia as well. Within those different trips abroad, what would you say are some of the lessons that you've taken away, both as in your career, but then also in your life as well?
So I never traveled abroad except, my family's from Canada, so I spent a lot of time there. And then maybe 2 ridiculous trips to Tijuana and like the Caribbean islands,
mm-hmm.
where I learned nothing. Until I went to Nebraska, and my dean there who hired me, pretty amazing guy, had grown up a missionary kid in Ethiopia. So he had a heart for developing democracies that were trying to establish a free press. And Ethiopia was one of those countries. So he sent me there. He just thought the way I taught would cross cultures for some reason. And I was just scared to death. But I met really interesting students there, and I ran a course really similar to our course to working journalists and journalism grad students. And I started with Sarah Clark, story that I started with you guys. And it went really well, and like I made friends, unbelievable, and he wound up sending me there like 6 or 7 times. Then he sent me to Kosovo, a country I knew very little about, except that Bill Clinton had, it's kind of the only successful intervention we've ever made in my lifetime into another country, right. Really, And so that was really interesting, meeting ethnic Albanians and Serbians and doing stories with them, and just fascinating. And then he sent me to India, and then we started bringing students to these places. And what I really figured out from all that is that there's so many other ways to do things. And quit assuming that your way is the best way. Right. You know what I mean? I didn't understand reporting, writing, definitely not the First Amendment, definitely not ethics, until I got into some really ethical dilemmas there. Like I was always a seek truth and report it guy, 100% bulldog, let's fight through it, the truth matters. But then I realized the damage that some truths can do in a country like that and how people can get hurt, including journalists.
What was a specific example?
We were doing some stories in Ethiopia, for example, about Orthodox Christian priests who were telling HIV patients not to take their meds, their Western meds, because it shows that they didn't have enough belief in God's power to heal.
Oh, wow.
And they were dying, and they were getting sick and dying. And so publishing a story like that can be pretty controversial. I mean, the power of the church, In Kosovo, there were legal mining companies who mined coal. It was a very, Russian era, Soviet era. Coal plants were powering the country. But people couldn't afford coal, and they couldn't afford to heat their homes, so they would basically dig in their backyards and make their own mines that were totally unsafe and just super dangerous, but they couldn't afford to buy coal from the companies. Mm-hmm. Like there were real problems. And then, I don't know, the dangers of publishing things, and then the dangers of choosing not to publish things, like the pollution from these, coal power plants that were killing people nearby. And they were never telling people that it was dangerous. And they were cleaning soot off their windows with rags every day, The stuff was in their lungs. And so, I learned that, I might not want to do the really big-time investigative story like my wife does, but maybe I should, because people are dying, And so, I don't know, it kind of changed my attitude toward all the SPJ Code of Ethics. It changed how I felt about news judgment. It changed everything. And I think it changed everything about how I see the world politically. It changed some things I think theologically, Yeah.
Do you think Americans are more prone to the belief that their way is the right way, and be damned if you say otherwise?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have an entire party in this country that screams America first, and that matters. And that group is also purporting to be a religious group. And if you are, I don't know, I don't want to get too mired in all of this, but in the end, I think you got to see all people as mattering. And if you don't, that's problematic. And journalists especially have to protect the right of the individual, I mean, I saw it the other day. People were just crapping on lawyers and journalists. And I always go back to this horrible movie with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino in it. I may have talked about it in class. It's a movie called Devil's Advocate. It's one of the worst movies ever made. And
I mean, those are two great actors, right?
definitely. I mean, worst Al Pacino movie maybe ever made. Charlize Theron's in it too. There's a lot of good actors in it, but ultimately, the devil comes to earth in the form of a lawyer, and he's trying to seduce Keanu Reeves into doing bad stuff. And when it doesn't work, and Keanu Reeves' soul is still pure, at the end he comes back as a journalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, what do these two professions have in common? Well, I would argue the two things they have in common is they protect your individual rights. They protect the rights of the little guy. Now, obviously, that means that when you have a bad journalist and when you have a bad lawyer, that's a really horrible thing, unethical ones, because they can do some real damage. You know what I mean? But in the end, these are the people that power fears. And so power wants us to think that all lawyers are greedy, horrible people, and that all journalists just want clicks and that they're, sensationalist liars. You know what I mean? Well, who wants us to think that? It's power that wants us to think that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
When I grew up, journalists were heroes. So were doctors, sometimes politicians, government leaders. How do we feel about those people now? Cops were heroes. I don't know.
I think there's potential for that to come about, but where those old groups that you mentioned could become heroes once again, but it seems like there's a lot of forces working against that from being the case.
There's a lot of bad actors in the political realm, a lot of bad actors in the religion realm. I don't think priests are seen the way they used to be seen, or pastors either. A lot of bad actors in the media realm, even locally.
Do you think that can get changed through a new generation coming about in those different fields?
I don't know. My generation has wrecked everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of up to you, buddy.
I know.
Good luck.
No pressure. No pressure. I was thinking about this the other day, talking about Americans and travel, because I come from a hometown where the stereotypical travel would be Florida or Mexican resort.
So it's a resort where you don't engage with the real people out there.
And then you're scared the entire time from the shuttle from the Cancun airport to your resort.
But you buddy up with a waiter and you overtip them and then you feel better.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, but I was like, what if the government created some sort of program where a certain amount of tax dollars gets funded into some sort of area where you could get a free trip, perhaps, and you go and you can get better relationships with different countries overseas, and then it's like there's a program, and then all of a sudden you create this diplomatic and cultural relationship with this country by having your citizens go travel over there and see what it's like, and then maybe their citizens can come and travel here. I think that could do a lot of good.
There were times when I've heard politicians in my lifetime suggest this very thing, that before you go to college or right after, you do a tour in the Army or the armed forces or Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, or a mission. Like if you're religious, a mission, something that gives you another perspective on the world. I'm not always sure missions do that. Maybe they do, but that seems like a really smart thing to do. And the way certain universities sell their freshman experience, where they're required to go abroad, freshmen are required to go abroad. I know this is happening at Florida universities as kind of a recruiting thing, but they don't do that right either. They're not engaging with really engaging with the culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're doing tourism and a study abroad. I mean, I've talked to so many students who do a study abroad, and all they did was hang out with expats the whole time.
Yeah.
And spoke English, which is why, I try to do those trips right when we go abroad with students. And I didn't do them right the first couple of times I did them because of my fear of being uncomfortable, but I've changed all that.
So what do you tell yourself when you're feeling that fear of discomfort arising? How do you go about alleviating it?
I think two things. One is you got to prepare. Like you got to report your way out of discomfort. Report your way out of not knowing. Do your research. Do your reading. You know what I mean? Read a great author from that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Read about that part of the world, but not through an American perspective or a Western perspective. Then secondly, you got to let go. You can't overplan. That's a very American thing to do. You got to let things roll and see what happens. So last time I went to India, we had 2.5 weeks, which meant we had like 3 days to really find characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just turned 3 students loose in this brick factory and said, find your main character in 3 days. And they'd been taking classes with me for so long that they found them in like an hour. They found the 3 moms. This is who we're doing a story on. You know what I mean? And it's because they let go. They were ready for the trip. They did their research. They did their reading, and they let go and just talk to anybody they could find who would talk to them.
Do you think that's the underlying principle to your idea of writing like a bulldozer, in the sense that you just don't even think about necessarily the mistakes that you're making, whether that be grammatically, factually, punctuationally, whatever it happens to be? Just let go and just focus right here on the moment, sort of deal.
I think reporting's a little bit different. I mean, there's nuance, there's, cultural, there's, you have to have a certain amount of cultural knowledge to be able to work within a culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you got to get rid of this idea of fearing failure and fearing rejection. I talk a lot in class about what's the worst that can happen, when you call somebody, when you try to take a photo on the sideline of Williams Arena, and maybe the athletic office told you could only sit there, but what if you move a little? And what if you get the shot? What's the worst that can happen? They tell you to move back. They tell you no. They kick you out, but you got your photo,
Yeah.
Or you repair that relationship later and you come back and try again in another game, A lot of it has to do with just putting yourself out there,
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, I think that
within reason, though.
That cliche is a cliche because it's true, because it works in so many situations, I'm not saying like go do something naughty just to be naughty, but sometimes you got to go with your instincts. And something I really learned from my wife. She's had so many battles with editors and battles with sources, and in the end, she's almost always proven to be right. I mean, I haven't won a fight with her either, so
Yeah, that's another story for another time, perhaps. Yes. Right there. You wrote a book called Nebraska Ball about Tim Miles, the head basketball coach at Nebraska. What was your favorite part and your least favorite part about writing that book?
Well, the intent was when I was a kid, I loved college basketball, and I loved A Season on the Brink, which is about Bobby Knight. John Feinstein spent a year with the Indiana, and they had a really tough year, and they blew the first round of the NCAA tournament, even though they were ranked like a number 1 seed or whatever. Then the next year they won it all, and he wrote another chapter, and the book, which had failed in its first year, sold 2 million copies. So that was the idea. I'm going to sell 2 million copies. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to become famous and make a lot of money. And then I can just write books the rest of my life. So a bunch of serendipity happened, and I got to spend a year with Tim Miles in one of the worst, back then, Power 5 schools in all of college basketball. It never won a tournament game, ever. And it wound up being really therapeutic. I loved practices. I loved the small tragedies and the small victories that happened every day in practice. I loved being where readers and fans couldn't go. So the big high was probably getting to go to Indiana and see a game there. And it was a pretty magical night. They blew out Indiana on senior night. And so they were in the locker room celebrating while outside the seniors were getting decorated, and all the fans had stayed after the game to celebrate the seniors. But it was like a morgue in there.
Yeah.
And Tim Miles had done that. It was pretty amazing. Michigan State was another cool thing to do. Low point was probably Tim reading it meeting with me and just begging me to take all the swear words out. And I capitulated on a few. I don't know if you've read your Otter AI transcripts, but people will say the word like 3 times in a sentence.
I probably said it multiple times in this interview.
And it's in print, it's just unreadable.
Yeah.
So you have to edit some of those likes out. You have to give them enough to show their character, but then take all the extra ones out. And Tim, swore as his verbal tick.
Really?
So it was in there way too much. And I had thought it was really funny. And I realized in that moment, it's not that funny, And because of his kids and because of his mom, some of the really, let's say, male testosterone language that happened in practice, I probably could have backed off on some of that, but I wanted it to be a very real experience, So I was battling the same things we battle in SBJ about truth mattering and minimizing harm,
Yeah.
That was kind of rough.
Did you end up selling 2 million copies?
I did not. I think I made $28.12 last year off my book.
So I think, is that one copy was sold?
I don't know how that works.
Okay.
I mean, I think I make $2 per copy.
Okay.
So
Then
maybe 14 copies got sold last year, but I don't think people are itching, Had he won a title that next year when he had everybody coming back, because it's a tragic ending to that book where he gets 2 technicals in the first round of the tournament.
Really?
Where they're trying to win their first game ever, and they just get blown out by Baylor, and he has to watch it from the locker room. So it's a great dramatic ending. But if he comes back the next year and he has all his players back, which he didn't graduate anybody really, and they had a great year, I might have sold a lot of copies, but in the end I didn't. And because it was more journalistic than promotional, thank God, Nebraska wanted nothing to do with it. So they had promised to sell it at games and sell it everywhere, campus bookstore, and they didn't do that. So
No.
yeah, it was rough. And I made some bad decisions with my publisher that if I'd known what I know now, I would have done differently. The title, the cover, stuff like that, how it was promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you plan on writing another book in the future?
Yes. If I can get a handle on my classes and get some space to do it, yeah, definitely. Yep.
Would you be willing to share what ideas you're kicking around, or is that to be disclosed?
I think my best avenue back into the publishing world is probably through sports and doing something similar about a story that's different enough for me to care about, because I don't want to do the same thing, but gets me back in the rhythm of writing, and then I could go off and do something else. I really want to do something in India, but with where I'm at with family, I don't have the space to spend a semester there. But down the road, I think there's a book there somewhere.
Yeah, that's exciting to look forward to that.
Yeah, I have a buddy there who wants to co-write a book.
I do this kind of fun thought exercise, right? Use Mount Rushmore as a metaphor. So I'm curious on since we're talking about books, what is your literary Mount Rushmore for books, in your opinion? Your top 4, one could say.
Can we go with authors instead?
Sure.
Books? I really think the best writer I've ever read is a guy named Richard Rousseau, and he has a book called Straight Man that really helped me understand myself and education and why a sense of humor is so important in this business. Then I would say there's a guy named Larry Brown who he's a firefighter in Oxford, Mississippi. So he's surrounded by all these literary giants at Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Eudora Welty. It's even where that lawyer guy who wrote all the Client and The Firm and all that,
Mm-hmm.
John, I can't remember his name, but so popular fiction comes from there, and all these literary giants come from there. Faulkner. Everybody comes from there. And he just wanted to be a writer so bad, and he never broke through until his 40s. And now he has this, and he died young, unfortunately, but he has this great, just courageous fiction. And he's an ancestor of the literary tree of Flannery O'Connor, who's probably my favorite author of all time. Flannery O'Connor of the classics in American lit. She's it. I think she doesn't get the fame and recognition that Hemingway and Faulkner get, but I think she's twice the writer.
Really?
They are, yeah. She's amazing. And then I like a lot of writers, but there's an author from Southern California named Amy Bender, who I once got to interview, and she said she likes to enter stories through the side door. And that tells you everything you need to know about how weird those stories are. So those would be American authors. I mean, I think there's a lot of great world lit out there. Right now I'm reading Edgar Carrot, who's kind of Israel's David Sedaris, kind of a humorist.
Okay.
He's really brilliant. And that's been really fun because I'm really conflicted about Palestine, Israel, and I don't know how to think about it. And he helps me think about it, because he lives in Tel Aviv, and it's really crazy.
Yeah, I'll have to read that because I'm at this point going to be going to Israel in May.
Really?
Through the Hillel Center.
Oh, that's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah, they're trying to get a group of non-Jewish students to go over there, and I got asked to go.
Oh.
And they said I could do reporting when I'm over there, too.
Yeah, if they need a prof, drop my name.
I will.
We had a magazine class and documentary class scheduled to go to Palestine in 2024. And we had to scratch that because of the war. I did a scouting trip to Bethlehem. We were going to stay in Palestine and tell the story from the Palestine point of view, mainly from the point of view of Palestinian Christians. Mm-hmm. It's a weird place to be.
Yeah.
As a Christian in Palestine, an Arab Christian. Yeah, it's a really interesting place.
You'll have to share me that book and that author so I can read that, because that's one thing I want to do is to read up on the conflict. I mean, the word complex is an understatement when it comes to that whole situation over there. So
I think I would read a history book on the history of the region, and I would read a political book about the region, and then I would read just fiction from Edgar Carrot.
Yeah,
how you almost have a sense of humor to live in Tel Aviv.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's kind of reminds me of those that lived in Berlin during the Cold War, and kind of how it was just. And in West Berlin in particular, it was just a crazy place to live. And even now, it still kind of has remnants of that that YOLO sort of mentality, in the sense that if the World War III were to break out, that's the first place it's probably going to go. And so it's a gallows humor almost. And I don't know if it's
the art that came out of that.
Yeah.
That time and place is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if Tel Aviv is maybe an appropriate equivalent, but certainly kind of has similarities in that sense. It's just in the crosshair of a very volatile area in the world. So I'm very much looking forward to going out there, knock on wood that it stays calm enough that we're able to. But end of May, maybe we'll take Youthful Perspectives out to Jerusalem, perhaps, do some interviews out there.
That'd be great.
What is, in your opinion, the difference between a good piece of writing and a great piece of writing?
I think a good piece of writing could be like a yeoman's effort. Like, it could be solid, right? A great piece of writing has sentences and ideas that I've never confronted before. You know what I mean? There's a writer named Tim Gautreaux I really like. I like Southern writers a lot. And he said, no story is really worth reading unless there's life and death in it. Unless I can learn about how to live my life. Why am I reading this? And I think he was talking about fiction, but I think if we brought that to journalism, we'd be more relevant, and people would be more willing to spend money on a subscription.
Yeah. That kind of comes back to the idea we were talking about earlier on not focusing necessarily on the profit margins, but the quality of the product that you're providing.
And I think where journalists get anxious, and maybe all artists get anxious, authors, painters, anybody, is the idea is that if I do well, if I do good journalism, if I do good stories, good photos, good graphics, if I do my job really well, the readers will be there, and I'll make enough money to pay the rent and to raise a family. now there are forces out there that can get in the way of that. That being good isn't good enough. You have to have luck. You have to have things fall your way. You have to have ethical bean counters and leaders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so much that you don't control now just by being good at what you do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not convinced that journalists should brand themselves, that they should be part of the story.
Yeah.
They'll do a better job if they're not part of the story and they can see others in the story. When we get too big, or our egos get too big, that gets in the way of doing good stories, you know?
Yeah.
So demanding that we have followers, demanding that we include ourselves in our stories, refer to our interview, that bothers me. And the fact that I could be wrong about that, that really bothers me.
So, like, you're not a fan of Hunter S. Thompson then?
Yeah. I mean, I like that movement, and I like the truth in that movement, and I like the subversive nature of that movement at a time when the world needed some subversives, but I don't like how it was about them. You know what I mean? I don't like it when really good beat writers who are really good storytellers are more concerned with how many followers they have on Twitter.
Yeah.
And they start messaging in ways that improve that number instead of just telling good stories to get that number, you know?
Lose the plot.
Yeah, well, I mean, how you get there matters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Ends justifying means and all that,
Yeah.
you know? And I understand their argument for the ends justifying the means. If I do all this other crap, then I can do this and get more eyeballs to it on the stuff that matters. So I get that. Nick Cage does 9 really bad movies to do one good one.
Right.
I understand that, you know?
Yeah. It's the ethical dilemma then that this industry is filled with.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of how you go about it, I suppose.
Yep.
Coming up here on our time limit, my last question I have for you. What do you want written as your epitaph?
My epitaph. It's a funny word, isn't it?
It is.
I loved using that word in our publication, East Bank Epitaph. I don't know. I don't want to say something that, again, could be, I don't know, macrame or crocheted onto a pillow.
Right.
I don't know. Like that he made a difference, that he affected lives, that he was, modest enough to realize he didn't know anything, and that education was a way to try to figure stuff out alongside his colleagues and alongside his students. I don't know. I'll have to think on that one.
Yeah.
Probably some kind of John Prine lyric of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could say, taught those to name dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I stole that, obviously, from Roy Peter Clark, but and other great editors. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Hopefully it won't be something you have to worry about for many, many years to come.
Yeah, I hope not.
But
yeah.
Fun thought exercise nonetheless.
What's yours?
I always like I have 3 quotes that I live by, more or less. Sic transit gloria mundi, all glory is fleeting. So don't get too high on your horse. Think different, Steve Jobs. And then Bob Dylan's, those not busy being born or busy dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like having that last quote as your epitaph is kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great quote to live by.
Yeah.
And if you have that as your...
Probably not a bad one to die by either.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like Neil Young. It's better to burn out than fade away. I mean, Kurt Cobain quoted that in his suicide letter.
Yeah.
And that's a heavy thought. But I
don't agree with it at all, but it's a heavy thought. It's an interesting thought.
It is.
I would love to have Kurt Cobain on Earth right now.
Oh, yeah.
Doing songs and making the world a better place.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I don't know what I would pick for my epitaph. I think just for now I would say, those not busy being born or busy
Mason,
dying.
You're going to come up with a quote of your own. You're going to be fine.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that's the goal. But thank you, Scott, for coming on.
Hey, it was a joy, and good luck with the podcast, and keep getting good guests. And if you need help getting guests in Tel Aviv, let me know. I know a couple people.
Will do.
So
thank you. Thank you for listening to Youthful Perspectives. On top of everything Scott has already taught me, I appreciated his reinforcement on the importance of travel and understanding that there are many different ways to go about life. I also was struck by Scott's emphasis on motivating yourself and others to avoid complacency by striving to greatly do worthwhile things. Finally, Scott's ability to project his love for teaching and guiding students on writing important stories was something I believe all great educators and leaders do well. By explaining the why behind what you're trying to accomplish, paired with leadership that genuinely wants to see success, great pieces of work will follow. I'll conclude by quoting the fictional educator that reminds me of Scott, Mr. Keating from Dead Poets Society, who told his aspiring students about the play of life by saying this, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be? This is Mason Beerbaum, signing off.